in these situations, and people would sell themselves into slavery in order to gain, the security that it offered over being a day laborer. That's hard for us to get our minds around, in the modern age.
Was it chattel slavery, like is practiced in the New World? But
no, I mean,
I think people get that confused a lot.
Well, so I hate how this is framed from the Pints with Aquinas guy, because it's like, is it chattel slavery? Yes, it was very obviously in Leviticus 25:44-46. I mean, that's a clear-cut answer. But then he goes further to compare it to antebellum slavery, which brings on, I feel like, a whole lot more connotations to like slavery in that aspect, because there were different circumstances for antebellum slavery versus the chattel slavery that was practiced in the ancient Near East. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think his answer is, like, if I'm remembering it correctly, is sort of the stereotypical apologist answer, and it makes me want to weep and then die. So I guess we should listen to it so that I can feel like I need to weep and then die.
All right. Well, I hate to make you feel that way, Josh. What's so perverse about slavery in the New World was it ended up as a race-based thing. And people have a hard time wrapping their mind around the fact that in the ancient world is like anybody could become a slave,
That makes it so much better.
Everybody say it with me. Therefore, what?
What?
Right? Like, therefore what, Dr. Bergsma? Oh, it wasn't based on race. Okay. Then it's fine. Yeah, I get tired of this one. It's not based on race. Now, like, to be 100% clear, that is horrific that slavery became based on race, right? For a whole set of reasons, right? A whole, the aftermath of that continues to have detrimental effects on the world around us, right? But it doesn't, let's say best case scenario for his analogy. Well, he wasn't a serial killer that killed scores of people. He was only a serial killer that killed like 5 people. Oh,
that's so much better.
Okay. He closed the case, right? This one's all right. We got better things to do. Like, give me a break. Give me a break. It's just this sort of thing that it's like, let's bring up something that's worse and say, well, it's not that.
Mm-hmm.
But then not actually deal with what it was, right? Because it's, even though it's not based on a particular race, it's, are you a foreigner? Yep. You're the ones that can be enslaved now as chattel slaves. Israelites can't. My people can't. Chosen people can't be, right? Can't even keep them as indentured servants anymore by the time you get to Leviticus 25. But foreigners, chattel slaves, no problem, right? It's just, yeah, therefore what? That's what we should all be asking. Therefore what?
Yeah. And I don't know. I could be wrong about this, but just thinking about this a little bit more, because this is a common argument that they use. But for anybody that doesn't know, like, the topic of race and like what race is, it has a complex history. And from what I understand about race is that, going back to ancient history, race was more akin to people groups. And so like, that's why, Jew or Jewish is both a religion and a race of people, because the Jewish, there's the Jewish religion, but then also there's a group of people who were all Jews, but are also Jewish because they share a bunch of characteristics with one another. They're a whole people group. And so like, I kind of feel like, and maybe I need to think more on this and you might disagree, Josh, but I feel like the kind of slavery that was practiced, the chattel slavery, at least, that was practiced in Israel, being that they had laws specifically about how you can't enslave your fellow Israelite, and you could only enslave people outside of Israel, like foreigners. in the context that are listed in the Bible, I kind of feel like in a non-anachronistic sense of race, it was kind of race-based because you weren't enslaving Israelites. Now, that doesn't mean that, obviously Israelites couldn't be enslaved. I'm just saying that, like, I feel like the conversation that they're having right here is a lot more complicated than they're letting on. And mentioning of race adds a layer of complexity onto the conversation. I feel like you got to be way more nuanced to the discussion than they are letting on.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think in best case scenario for the analogy, it's like, well, Your Honor, the defendant killed these, murdered these 6 people and tortured them in these vile ways, but before he did so, well, Your Honor, my client did not create lampshades out of. I mean, let's just get that right off the table right away, right? Hey, think about this other Sid did. He created lampshades with he didn't do anything like that, right? So let's just start off with that. Like, oh, okay. I mean, yeah, yeah. That's sort of what comes to mind for me.
Yeah. All right, let's listen to just a little bit more of the interview, and then we've got a few super chats to
I think he goes into like the New Testament after another minute or so, and that's probably outside of my wheelhouse. So okay. I think if I remember what he says, it's sort of like probably ought to have somebody else rag on him about it.
You're Caucasian or African or Semitic or whatever, that was like equal opportunity employer, so anybody. And within Egypt, Egyptians themselves could be reduced to slavery if they committed a crime or something like that, and so it was not racial at all in the ancient world. So that's one thing you have to wrap your mind. And the other thing you got to wrap your mind around is that typically there were expectations, there were cultural expectations, and legally. An owner might be able to be a real jerk, but there were social norms that were typically upheld, and most people did not want to be perceived as an evil person in the eyes of the rest of society. And so usually there was this effort to be humanitarian towards the people that worked for you.
I mean, that's just a bullshit statement. I'm sorry. It's just a bullshit statement. Like, evidence, please, of these social norms. First of all, it's completely nebulous. People didn't want to be seen as evil. Sure, right? What are you defining as evil? I mean, sorry, that makes me very upset because like when you use this sort of ambiguity, it's like saying, well, you have to love your neighbor, right? Or you love the foreigner. You don't want to be seen as evil. Well, of course, but see, if you're equivocating on the use of the term evil, right? We would say, and hopefully even more so as time goes forward, that it's evil to like beat our children, right? With wooden rods or with switches or stuff. Like, hopefully 50 years from now, they'll say, well, it's evil. You wouldn't want to be evil. So back in the 1950s, they wouldn't have wanted to be evil. So certainly they wouldn't beat their kids with switches. Well, right. But they didn't think it was evil. Right. So it doesn't work that way. That's an equivocation. You can't, you have to be a lot more specific about what you're saying. And what are these social norms that he's talking about? What are these laws that he's talking about that say you could be a jerk? What does that mean, to be a jerk? And what does it mean when it says that they didn't want to be evil? And so there are these social pressures to keep you from being evil. What are those? What are you talking about? Because I think it's just an attempt to whitewash this stuff. And I don't like it, obviously.
Right. No, I think that he's totally trying to whitewash it and trying to make it seem like, oh yeah, there's a possibility that people could be jerks, which I agree with you. He's definitely using very vague language here in order to describe it. And he's not being very specific about what he means, because like what's evil to us now is obviously not necessarily going to directly map to what people would consider evil in Israel before the Common Era, or in first century Israel. Like I just I find that it's rather weird to be this anachronistic about these terms, because he's obviously speaking in ways that we would understand now. Like, oh, what does it mean to be a jerk? Well, as a master of a slave, I feel like you're automatically a fucking jerk,
Yeah, that's a good point.
like and so I mean that's obviously going to vary between people and different people. Like, what does it mean for jerk? Which I find it really weird that there are Christians and Christian apologists out there that don't find it to be a jerk thing for somebody to own a slave, and it seems really weird to me.
Yeah.